Good afternoon to you. I'm sure you've been watching the situation, I suppose I should say chaos really, in our metros. I mean, look at Gauteng. Last week, the ANC unable to elect a mayor in Ekhuruleni because the EFF councillors voted for the DA's Tania Campbell. In the end, the EFF and the ANC could just not agree on what to do between them. To add to that, Action SA has withdrawn from the DA-led coalition in Ekhuruleni, saying it will back the DA only to keep the ANC out of power, but that it won't work with the DA in minority administrations. So then, could what happens in Ekhuruleni happen in national government after 2024? It's a complicated question. Professor Raymond Suttner has been looking at it. Professor Suttner, good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time. We saw the situation developing in Ekhuruleni last week. The ANC and the EFF just could not agree, and we're moving towards coalitions in provincial government and national government. I mean, could this kind of thing happen in national government in 18 months' time?
Well, I do think that I'm not a big scholar of coalitions, but I was looking at what was happening in Ekhuruleni, and it seemed to point to wider significance than this metro. What I found interesting was that the EFF, which is completely unreliable as a force, as a voting force, decide to vote for the DA, and the ANC just lost what they seemed like they would have won a few weeks earlier. And what I think it points to is that ideology means nothing at the moment, but what is significant is numbers. And it could well have been that the vote was swung by a couple of minuscule parties, some of whom are very disreputable parties. So we've got a situation where the future of South African parliamentary politics, provincial politics, and metro politics is not predictable according to the conventional norms, who will vote for policies that they favor and things like that. It's, in the case of the EFF, you have a pseudo-ideological party which has a lot to say about a lot of different things, but the way it acts is often very inconsistent with that. So that the EFF is like unguided missile. It will possibly vote for the ANC one day secretly, and because it hasn't admitted it was a secret ballot, hasn't admitted that it voted for the ANC in some of the reports. And it may vote for the DA on another occasion, although the DA doesn't want them. So it's very unpredictable. And what I think it means in 2024 is that ANC may get 40%, 45%, and it may make a deal with the DA, who knows. But if it doesn't, it's an alliance, it's an unstated alliance with the EFF, who could easily pull the plug on them, as they did with the EFF in Ekhuruleni and in Johannesburg. So we're looking at a future of unstable government. Whatever you think of government, the one thing that would be preferable is to have it continue to run and do what the little that it does do without interruptions.
This idea that we're in a sort of post-ideology era where parties are not following an ideology, how important is that? I mean, I suppose in the past, if you had, just to sort of oversimplify it, parties on the left and parties on the right, you would kind of expect the parties on the left to work together and the parties on the right to work together. But if there's no ideology, I mean, does it make coalitions harder to predict?
Well, I don't think we're in a post-ideology world. You know, the Brazilian election was very ideological. with a sort of semi-fascist incumbent and a centre-left who became president again, Lula. But I think South African politics unusually has become very de-ideologized. In 1990 till about the year 2006 or so, it was full of debate about gear and all sorts of things. So that I think it's recent times that people have been battling for positions, not just ANC people, and that has preoccupied them because positions also brings power to award tenders and to enrich themselves and so forth. So I think it is true in South Africa that there is an absence of ideology. Not everyone in the ANC, because although I am not trying to change the ANC from within, and I've left the ANC, there are some people who in good faith are trying to restore the ANC to what it was or what we romanticize it as having been. You know, some of the things that I thought the ANC was maybe were not true, but I think there was definitely an ideological call.
So how do we then manage all of this? I mean, there have been lots of coalitions in many places around the world. Germany, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Belgium, lots of places. What those countries do have, and this may be important, I don't know, in those countries, they don't have the inequality that we have. And I wonder if that means that the constituencies that the parties represent are just not as far apart. Whereas I think if you look at the Freedom Front Plus on one side of our parliamentary politics, the Pan-Africanist Congress on the other side of our parliamentary politics, I mean, they're never going to work together. Oh, it doesn't seem like it. So do you think that our inequality, the nature of our society, actually makes coalitions harder than maybe in some other countries that are used to coalitions?
Well, you know, it's a different angle that you're taking on the lessons of these other places, because what is rather weak in the studies that have been made of Germany, Norway, and all these places is people are just producing rules that you must agree on ideology and you must agree on this, that, and the other. Now, what you have just said now is it's very difficult to get that agreement when there's such a high level of inequality. However, there's a qualifier. The ANC is historically the organization that represents the poor and is historically committed to ending inequality. But can we say that it is anymore? That there is actually such a substantial difference between the Freedom Front's attitude to the poor and the ANC's attitude to the poor. So that it's complicated. This whole thing of stealing from the poor has complicated matters. It's not the Freedom Front Plus that stole PPE equipment during COVID. It's not the Freedom Front Plus and ACDP, as far as I know, who stole money from the flood relief in KZN. So we've got a situation which is really a collapse of politics in the formal sense, in the sense that we can't find a way of putting it all together, given the components, the players. ANC seems likely to elect a very similar group of people in its conference in December. The DA just doesn't get it. You know, it's losing black leaders left, right, and center. It hasn't got a message. So the DA is not going to. Well, it will not increase. Its polls say it will not increase, but let's say it increases. It will increase marginally. So there's no way of getting, in my view, a stable coherent government that will implement policies that make a difference to the country. And the point you make about inequalities is important, except for the fact that who is supposed to be the bearer of the interests of those who are suffering from inequalities? That is blurred. It wasn't blurred in 1994. Now it is blurred.
I think in a way that there are other things. So there's sort of, people don't go into coalitions with the aim of helping the person they're in a coalition with. And I think this may explain why Action SA is pulled out of the coalition with the Democratic Alliance in Ekhuruleni, because it wants the DA's voters, right? Let me make what may seem a mad prediction to you, and I could well be wrong. It would seem to me, if the ANC got 49% in the national election, the one party it could do a deal with that it would know would not steal its voters would actually be the Freedom Front Plus, if you see what I mean. That may seem counterintuitive, but for bad faith reasons, there's a lot that happens in coalitions that actually makes them unworkable from the very beginning.
Yeah, well, you see, the ANC could even, degraded as it has become, it could make an alliance with the Patriotic Alliance, a front, or what's it called now?
Yes, the Patriotic Front. Yes.
Group. And that could also solve it on a numerical basis, but it would be extremely discreditable way of handling the situation. There are a number of different ones that I agree with you. Freedom Front Plus might well be a partner. I don't find anything outrageous anymore now that the ANC has lost its soul. If it had its soul once, it doesn't have it anymore, so it's quite happy to. I think the Freedom Front Plus may well be more principled than the ANC.
Well, there's something that's going to get Twitter going. Professor Raymond Suttner, I really appreciate the time.